Hi, I'm Ryan Penny, and welcome to the Catholic Sphere. This week, our diverse Catholic guests tell us how they're working to spread the faith to all corners of the internet. First, we have Lizzie Rize in California. She's a Catholic social media influencer who's shedding light on her journey with mental health while never shying away from her Catholic faith. Kyle Walter is with us from Virginia. He's a husband and father of 4 with a zeal for using his social media page to show men that the best brotherhood is the fraternity of Christ. We're also joined by John Donahue in Florida. John runs an account called Truth Charting and uses his talents to garner the attention of Gen Z. Lizzie, I want to start out with you. What came first, the influencing or your Catholic faith?
So I started my YouTube channel kind of at the beginning of YouTube in 2010 when I was still a high school student. And at the time, I was making Protestant YouTube videos. I didn't start converting into Catholicism until 2017. And it was actually a really scary time because I'd been running my YouTube channel for so long and was doing it full time as my job. And I thought that I would lose thousands of subscribers when I became Catholic. And I did lose thousands of subscribers, but I also gained thousands of Catholic subscribers. And I've gotten so many messages that a lot of people who had been watching my YouTube channel before I was Catholic ended up converting with me because of my story.
Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God that you had the courage. It's one thing to convert privately as an individual who's not known by thousands and thousands of people. It's quite another to have that platform and know what's at stake, knowing that you could lose a lot of your followers, but still stepping forward and following what you know to be true anyway. So thanks be to God for your courage, Lizzie, and it's obviously being used to great effect and impact all over the world. So Kyle, now we want to know about your origin story. Do you consider yourself a cradle Catholic?
So I was baptized Catholic, but I certainly wouldn't consider myself a cradle Catholic. I also received my first communion at the age of 7. I don't remember that at all either. And that's really significant to me now because I have a 7-year-old son myself, and I want to ensure that I'm teaching him the importance of that sacrament and what the true presence actually means at a young age so he can carry that moment with him through life, because I didn't have that experience. I kind of fell away from the faith altogether after that point. My family wasn't a religious family whatsoever. They encouraged me to seek truth on my own. At that point, I thought all I needed was the Bible, and that really led to me being very indifferent about my faith. I started seeking all of my fulfillment in life from my profession. I became a police officer, had a great successful career doing that while I did it, but unfortunately it never really led me closer to the faith. I ended up moving my family out to the state of Montana, and by the grace of God, I was partnered with a devout Catholic man. And for months, I actually played devil's advocate with him against Catholicism. And then I ended up being partnered with a Protestant, the wife of a Protestant pastor who had a degree in biblical studies herself. And so I was taking what I was hearing from both of them. And in 2018, I couldn't deny the truth that Catholicism, the fullness of Christianity, was found in Catholicism. And I ended up signing up for RCIA and have been on fire for the faith ever since.
Magnificent, Kyle, that you, I'm sure it was a very frustrating experience at times, having to work with someone who challenged what you believed, but you didn't run away from it. You just kept on asking the hard questions, and God's providence took care of the rest. So, hallelujah. And John, now we want to know about your origin story. How did your childhood lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very devout Catholic family, I would say. We grew up going to this camp each year as a family, which was made for Catholic families to come and practice their faith together. That camp showed me a really vibrant and lovely side of Catholicism that ended up being a really big fire. It ended up igniting a really big fire in my heart throughout the rest of my life, really. So I continued growing up, going to this camp. I've been every year since I was 1, including this year. My dad and I went back to this camp, and it was just such a beautiful experience. Aside from that camp, we had a pretty good community of Catholics, I would say. Back home, we would have rosary nights on Friday nights and things like that. It was really good. I had a lot of Catholic friends my age, and we lived a really, what I would call a vibrant Catholic lifestyle. When I was in high school, I realized that there was a lot of other Catholic teenagers my age that didn't have that experience, and that their experience of the Catholic Church didn't really go past the classroom of the faith formation class. So I witnessed this in high school, realizing that there was a lot of young people that didn't get to see this vibrant side of Catholicism that I saw, this adventurous side of Catholicism. And my heart broke because, they see nothing valuable here. They see nothing valuable here because all they see is what happens in the faith formation classroom, which is very important and very good. And these catechists who are teaching these faith formation classrooms are doing their absolute best, and they're doing a good job. But it takes a lot more than that, I think, to truly bring someone to an all-in relationship with Jesus Christ, but an all-in attitude for the church. So when I graduated high school, I began working in the film industry, and that was quite the ride. I decided to leave the film industry just a few years later. The secular film industry anyways. I did end up returning back to the Catholic film industry and making promotional videos for Catholic ministries and such. But just about 2 years ago, I still had this fire in my heart for all of these young people who didn't get to see the vibrant, full perspective of what it's like to be Catholic, the adventurous side of a life with Christ. So 2 years ago, I started Truth Charting, and its sole purpose is to show young people that being Catholic isn't boring.
Yes, that the beauty of the faith is not just something that can be relegated to a textbook or a classroom. And you had the benefit, and not all Catholics do, of growing up in a vibrant Catholic community. And the faith has to be lived. It is a living, breathing thing. And there are not a lot of content creators and producers that they're not enough who are trying to show the real beauty of the Catholic faith. And you had that secular experience, and now you're wanting to use it for the greater glory of God, which is amazing. And you have this name, Truth Charting. And so my follow-up question is this, about this phrase that you're popularizing now on your page. You have a whole video to explain what you call the Digital Catholic Island. Can you explain what this is and why it's important for us to make a difference on the island?
Yes, absolutely. About a year ago, a friend in the Catholic film industry called me. We had a Zoom call, and he asked me, he's like, John, I've realized that these young people are spending hours and hours per day on their phone, on social media specifically. The average that I last checked was 7.5 hours per day between 13 to 18-year-olds. And he said, what do we do about this? Like, is that good? Should we be trying to get these kids off of it, or should we be trying to make this a better place? Should we be trying to make the internet more, just less sinful? And I had this thought in my head for the past few weeks, and I shared it with him. It was, you're right, they are practically living on the internet. And so I think we can see the internet as a new land, in the same way that missionaries in the early church would discover a new land. When America was found, we sent missionaries there pretty quick, I think, or at least it was in the works as soon as we found out. As soon as there's a new land that is found, we have to send missionaries there. His follow-up question to me was, do we sanctify the island or do we evacuate it? And after weeks of thinking about that, I had to really come to terms with the fact that the internet, it's not a real place. People who are living on the internet, it's kind of a mockery of real life. God has given us this life to go out and live and to be adventurous and to explore. He's given us a beautiful rock to live on. It truly is a shame when we have young people who are living on a virtual island and not real place. So what I've come to believe is that I think we need to do both. I think we do need to sanctify the island because people live there, and also it's one of the best evangelistic tools that we've ever had in the history of humanity. We need to get a balance. That's what I've come to terms with. We need to both evacuate people, get them into a healthy use of social media, if a use of social media at all. And we also need to just make this a better place. We need more digital missionaries going to the island and creating a bigger Catholic presence, or a Catholic village on that island, if you will.
Digital missionaries indeed, and all of you are in your very different ways and reaching the hard to reach. And we have to, and regardless of what people may think about the benefits, the pros, or the cons of social media, what you're saying, John, is that regardless, people are there. Millions of people are there, especially our youngest are there. And what does that leave us to do? We have to go and find them. We have to get them, if you will. So, and you're all doing that in your own different way. So Lizzie, your main focus online is mental health. Can you tell our audience about bipolar disorder?
So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in college, which is really common. It usually comes out in early adulthood. I was first diagnosed with major depressive disorder because I had a severe depression episode. And then we found out about a year later that I was misdiagnosed with that, and I actually have bipolar disorder. So there's a lot of misinformation about what bipolar actually is. So bipolar disorder is basically having two mental illnesses in one. There are depression episodes and manic episodes. Depression episodes consist of extreme fatigue, slowed down thoughts, loss of appetite, sleeping for 12 or 15 hours straight and still feeling so exhausted, regardless of how much sleep you get. It also involves thoughts of suicide, including suicide attempts. 50% of bipolar people will attempt suicide at some point in their life, and 25% of people with bipolar die by suicide. Manic episodes involve extreme energy and euphoria, racing thoughts, talking fast, hyperspirituality, impulsivity, overspending, extreme creativity in art, writing, or music, anger, sleeping only a few hours every night, or staying awake for multiple days at a time, but feeling full of energy. There's a type of mania that is less intense called hypomania, which is the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. There are also auditory and visual hallucinations, which can take place in manic or depression episodes. What bipolar is not is quick mood shifts. If someone is suddenly really angry, then really happy, then really sad, then really excited, that is not bipolar. Bipolar episodes last for a long time. So typically you'll be in a depression episode for 8 months and then a manic episode for 4 months. And then you can go a few months of not being in an episode at all. We have these stereotypes of quick mood changes, these sudden turn of emotions, and that's just not what bipolar is. Bipolar used to be called manic depressive disorder, and they changed the name in 1980, which I personally think was a mistake because the word bipolar sounds more casual, like just going between two moods, whereas bipolar is much deeper than that.
Very illuminating, Lizzie. Thank you for sharing all that. A lot of people don't know that. And this is especially important for those who have loved ones who have these mental conditions. You know, in order to love the people that God has placed in our lives, it's important to not fall into stereotypes or misinformation about these things, because our loved ones are there and our relationships are in the balance, and we have to love the people that God has put in our lives. So thank you for shedding light on all of that. And Kyle, your focus has been men, and men are looking to influencers for guidance on how to be manly. So what kind of guidance do you think they need, and how are you ministering to them?
So I would first bring up the point that I believe that the reason we're facing this crisis is because of the crisis of so many broken families. Typically, men's first example of being a man is from their father. And fatherlessness is such a epidemic or a pandemic going on where it's just a common thing, especially coming from law enforcement. Majority of people I dealt with, unfortunately, came from homes that didn't have father figures in them. And like we were talking already about, we spend so much of our time on social media, so they start seeking guidance elsewhere. And unfortunately, social media lacks a lot of authenticity, and men aren't being so forthcoming with all of their own shortcomings or their own faith journeys. And what I want to try to do is to not try to glorify myself, but rather glorify God, our Father in heaven, who's available to all of us, as well as emphasizing the greatness of the resource the church is for all men, especially with the sacraments to allow us to grow in our faith. I think men need to humble themselves and realize we can't do this on our own, and an abundance of graces are waiting for us within the sacraments.
Amazing. And so many men out there, it's so obvious, they don't know this. They don't often look to the Catholic faith as a source for them, as the source for them to become the men that they were meant to be, how God intended them to be. So many do not see that aspect of the Catholic faith, and you are one of these missionaries who are stepping into the breach to shed light on this absolutely vital and crucial truth. So very good work. And John, it seems like the younger you are, the less likely you are to be religious these days. But it seems like the younger people who are religious tend to gravitate toward non-denominational groups. So why do you think that is? And why are young people not being drawn as readily to Catholicism?
That is an excellent question. I think the reason is because different denominations of Christians have made the term religion synonymous with institution. Gen Z, to be clear, can't stand corporate language. They can't stand big institutions. They can't stand the government. They don't like these big organizations. I mean, they're teenagers. Of course, they're going to be a little bit rebellious right now. But also, I think there is something a little bit special about this generation that, we really kind of hate corporate language. We want you to be real with us. So non-denominationalism offers a message of relationship over religion. Sometimes they will say relationship, not religion. Sometimes they will completely cross out the word religion and make it into a bad thing. So this is one of the reasons. The other reason is that when a young person walks into a non-denominational church, they try to make it very, very apparent just by the aesthetic of the building that they are catering to you. We are investing into you as a young person. We have researched what you like. We have researched your interests, and we have aesthetically made this place for you. When I walk into a Catholic social hall, I don't get that same feeling most of the time. So those are two reasons. Another thing is because these non-denominational churches can often offer more of a grassroots feel and more of a freestyle technique of being Christian.
Very illuminating, yes. These are things that we have to be able to pinpoint, not just that something is happening. In this case, not just that young people, Gen Z, typically gravitates, if they are religious at all, tends to gravitate towards non-denominationalism, but we have to be able to pinpoint why that is, and then what we can do, how we can fill in the gaps as much as we can, but we have to know exactly what that is first. So thank you for sharing all that. Now, Lizzie, you've amassed a following of 19,000 people just on Instagram alone. What do you think are the most important lessons that people with mental illness need to learn? And how do you teach them that?
I think the biggest thing is being educated on it and being open to talking to other people about it. A lot of people are scared because of stigma to share about it with coworkers at school and even with friends and family members. And I think it's so important when being in an episode to have the support and understanding of everyone in your life. And so I try to really encourage people to be open about it and talk about it with people to have that community support. And I think I've inspired so many people because I've talked about it online in over 70 YouTube videos. So, like, everyone who knows about me knows I have bipolar disorder. So, just to be brave and vulnerable so that people can help you through it, and especially to keep you accountable to staying on medication, because that's a big part of bipolar, wanting to go off medication.
Brilliant, Lizzie. Yes, and it's like you help to make it so that people don't feel like they have to hide in their shame. That mental illness, it does not mean that you just have to be a pariah from social life, because that comes with it a whole assortment of problems, and you help to help people, especially young people, to embrace how they are, and because we all have a cross, but that we shouldn't hide in our shame. Christ came to save us from all of it. So thank you for that. And it's especially important on social media, which has been called almost a culture of comparison, that all of us with the smartphone, that all of us who have a smartphone in our hands can fall into this culture of comparison. So Kyle, can you talk about this culture of comparison that plagues men today, especially those on social media? What is the solution, and how are you helping?
Yeah, I think a lot of men are lacking role models in the real world. So they're seeking these role models on social media. And I think it's great that a lot of men are sharing these heroic stories on social media. However, a lot of men, they get short bursts of motivation from their stories, but then they find themselves comparing them to these people and thinking like, I'll never be a Navy SEAL, or I'll never be a professional athlete, so I'm always going to fall short of the mark. Unfortunately, too, a lot of these stories, or the most popular stories that tend to go viral, have nothing to do with the faith whatsoever, which should be the most important thing in all of our lives. I think leaning on, or the beautiful thing with Catholicism is the fact that we have the communion of saints. We have the best role models available to all of us. And there are so many of them. We can find somebody who can really relate to our own personal stories or struggles. And it's like St. Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. My message, or my mission, is to get men to realize we should all be striving to imitate Christ and not other broken men, because they always are going to miss the mark and leave you disappointed.
Exactly. That a very important distinction. If the other men in your life, or especially on social media, when you're only really seeing their highlight reel, if that becomes your North Star for masculinity, then that's a serious problem. God became incarnate to show us how to be fully human, how to be fully alive, and people need to know that He is our ultimate role model and guide above anyone else. And people like you, it'd be very easy for someone like you to be just another male influencer and say, hey, look how awesome I am, see how I'm leading my life, but you continually point men to Jesus Christ, and that is the way we have to go. So, John, sometimes I wonder if young people know there is a world outside of their phones. Can you tell us what the culture of comparison looks like to them, what it looks like to Gen Z?
Sure, yeah, I can share from my own experience. In fact, entering into the island to be a digital missionary there, I've really witnessed personally and felt this personally and experienced it personally, the effects of comparison on social media, and just how that's kind of how it's designed. You are designed to see the highlight reel, and the algorithms are made that way, so that's what you see. I have experienced some really negative effects just as being a digital missionary there, and it's made me realize that there actually isn't really a handbook on how to be a digital missionary. And it's made me really have to pioneer for myself, just to keep my own spiritual life and my own mental health in check. I've had to figure out ways that, okay, like how can I really live a balanced life and also still be present here on the internet and still be offering a good message. It's a tough balance, but I think it's definitely possible. What I also think that this has done to our generation is it's created they have a really hard time like confronting each other. They're not a very confrontational generation because of the internet. But that's just in real life. I think they actually are quite confrontational over the internet. I remember back when I was in high school, I had some relationships and friendships where some of our deepest talks would happen over text because it was just a little bit easier to do that way. So these are ways that we can like totally have full control over our image, and we can have much more time to think about our responses when we're doing it over the internet, and we can think about the best zinger because when we're having that one-on-one conversation with a person face to face in person, I mean, you always leave that interaction thinking about, man, I should have thought of that. I should have thought of that one zinger and really got him. I really could have got him there. But you can take your time on the internet. You can really form your own image, and that's created a big problem for our in-person interactions for our generation. And so I hope that the Lord will continue to guide me to a message that I can offer to this generation that shows that, hey, what if you were a part of a community of people in person? What if you joined into this adventure of the Catholic faith, or just the adventure of the Christian faith? Like, what if you jumped into this community of people who want to love one another and learn how to truly like interact with one another in a loving and realistic way, and be authentic and vulnerable with them, and not have to form this highlight reel every time that you have an interaction.
Thanks be to God, John, that you, like really all of you, are pointing them, like you're not trying to keep them locked into your account on social media. You're pointing them all to the life that is possible beyond their phone screen. That's ultimately where God is calling us into what's real, and that they do have what it takes to confront life head on and to pick up our cross, and that's where the real abundant life takes place. And so you all point them to that. So thank you again, Lizzie, Kyle, and John, for joining us today. We're looking forward to another episode with the three of you in the near future. And thank you for joining us. Do not forget to join us next week with host Father Joseph Mary Wolf right here on The Catholic Sphere.